What if you are watching the World Cup match when all of a sudden a doorway to another dimension opens, interrupting the game? They are the future soldiers, and they are alerting everyone to an impending alien invasion. Welcome to What a Story. The story starts with Dan, who teaches biology, resides with his wife Emmy and daughter Muri. Dan is waiting to hear back about a job at a research center while at a holiday gathering. He receives a call informing him that they have chosen another candidate for the job. He returns inside to watch the World Cup with his family, when all of a sudden, the arena experiences some wormhole opening, and many soldiers from the future emerge in front of the bewildered spectators. A female soldier informs everyone present that an overwhelming alien invasion will wipe humans off the face of the world in 30 years. The goal is to enlist as many people as possible to travel into the future and save humanity. After a year, there have been more casualties than anything else due to rioting and anti-war demonstrations that have continued since the conscription was first announced. Even Dan's students can't concentrate on their studies since they believe everyone will eventually pass away.
What's the point? The aliens kill us all.
Later, Dan receives a call to report for a draft. He later finds out after review that he is eligible because he passed away between the present and the period prior to the invasion. He has a tool attached to his arm that will help him jump through time. It is also revealed that Dan was a squad leader in Iraq, 15 years earlier. Dan is given 24 hours to settle his affairs, so he heads to Emmy's place of employment where she serves as a therapist for veterans of the draft. Dan's estranged father James, whom he resents for abandoning him and his mother years ago, is the only person Emmy assures him can help get the family to safety. James, who has gone off the grid and doesn't trust the authorities, is visited by Dan. James refuses to provide his assistance before Dan can declare he needs it.
What did you just say to me?
Which enrages Dan because that's all he's ever asked of him. James counters that he would have simply made matters worse for Dan and his mother. Dan returns home to Emmy and Muri, having to inform them that he has been drafted. They embrace Dan goodbye while crying. Dan reports to the draft, where he meets Cowan, Nora, Charlie, and Dorian. The time-jumping process and the strategy for the operation are explained to the draftees. Charlie notes that Dorian leapt back after killing an alien, which they refer to as white spikes.
The research facility is under attack.
The draftees are informed to enter the jump link into the future, where they will arrive on Miami Beach, with little time to prepare. The draftees are dropped off much higher than intended, which leads to several of them falling to their deaths while Dan and other draftees end up in the pool. Dan reports to the colonel after leaving, who tells the squad that the military has ordered a general bombardment of the area to exterminate all life. Before the explosives are dropped, she orders the crew to save the lab workers.
I need every able-bodied person on this rooftop!
The team enters the building and discovers the lab staff dead, but they manage to salvage their study. The squad soon encounters the dangerous and swift white spikes, which have whip-like tails. Using his combat skills, Dan tries to kill one of the aliens, and Dorian saves him. The team then proceeds to get out of the city, but the aliens are after them. Dan tries to save Cowan after he falls through a tunnel. The white spikes are closing in, so Nora and Cowan stay behind to hold off as many as possible, just before the military drops the bombs on the tunnel, killing Nora, Cowan, and the White Spikes. The draftees who are still alive awaken in a camp in the Dominican Republic. When Dan first meets the colonel, who turns out to be an adult Muri, his daughter.
Muri Forrest.
She feels some distance from Dan as a result of him finishing the draft. Dan learns that her team has found a female White Spike, whose physiology could be crucial in destroying the remainder of the hive. The soldiers find the female alien in the cave. But the alien is too strong and attacks them, killing the soldiers. Muri joins the rest of the team. A large number of male White Spikes start to descend. Dan helps Muri. Despite Dan almost jeopardizing the team's attempt to save Muri, they are able to capture the female alien. She reprimands him, and then reveals to him that he died 7 years after the draft in a car accident, and Muri witnessed his final moments, all of this being after he returned from the draft, and became disillusioned and left his family. The team transports the female back to an oil rig where the jump link is located, so they can use the blood of the female to create a toxin that will eliminate all White Spikes. Muri devotes all of his time to creating the toxin. Dan remarked that she is proud of her. Muri successfully extracts the toxin. Soon, a large number of other aliens invade the base and launch an attack, setting off another fierce battle. The female White Spike escapes from the jump link, just as the timer is about to run out. Muri is hit by the alien, and Dan helps her. When the female attacks, Muri is on the bridge when it collapses. Dan tries to save her, but she lets go, so the female alien can die, and Dan and the remaining draftees can return to the current year. When Dan gets back, he attempts urgently to leap back and try to save Muri, but it is ineffective because the jump link is no longer active, making the jump impossible. Dan goes back home. He tells Emmy that he met Muri when he was an adult, and that they had worked together. Emmy speculates that the invasion may have started much earlier than 2048, when the aliens are said to have arrived. Dan next visits a bar where he meets Dorian, who informs him that he has a terminal illness. When Dan inquires about a White Spike claw he had preserved as a memento, they find Russian ash on it. Dan questions a student about information on volcanic ash. The group concludes that the White Spikes have been on Earth all along and were only thawed out by global warming. A higher-up in the government rejects Dan, Charlie, and Dorian's request for assistance so they can embark on a mission to Russia. Dan asks James for assistance.
I need your help.
And together they and the other soldiers arrive in Russia, and find the location of the frozen White Spikes. It turns out that the ship they came in on was not theirs, but rather to a different species that was carrying the White Spikes as cargo to eliminate other planets. The aliens awaken and start to attack as they administer the toxin to the white spikes. Dorian gives his life to detonate a bomb that would destroy the white spikes after a fierce battle. Sadly, the female white spike is still alive and stalks Dan and James. Dan injects the toxin to the alien. She bites her arm off to stop the poison from spreading after they try to inject her with it. After beating it even more, Dan forces the toxin down the female's throat and then throws her down a cliff, where she splatters, effectively putting an end to all white spikes. As word of the war's averting spreads, the earlier higher-up claims responsibility for Dan and the others' journey. Muri is introduced to James by Dan, who is happy to see Emmy and Muri again. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next story.